In 1981, a witness claimed she saw the brutal murder and cremation of a woman underneath a tree on a stretch of deserted farmland. But there was no trace of the remains anywhere nearby, and investigators were stumped. For answers, they turned to the science of forensic geology. Marshall, Illinois is a small farming community just across the Wabash River from Terre Haute, Indiana. The rich soil feeds vast fields of corn and acres of soybeans. The biggest landowners in town were the Grabby family. Fred and Charlotte Grabby were very prosperous. Both worked the farm with their daughter, son, and daughter-in-law.
The Grabbys had a lot going for them. I mean, they had substantial resources, inheritance on Charlotte Grabby's part, and well into the six figures. So these were not poor, small dirt farmers.
Fred Grabby was easy to spot. At 6 foot 4 inches tall and close to 300 pounds, he dwarfed his petite wife.
Well, when I first got into the family, I thought Fred was very nice, very polite. He was fun to be around. He really seemed to like me. They worked a lot. Charlotte worked from daylight to dusk.
The Grabby marriage had its ups and downs like all marriages, but this one had some unusual twists. Fred Grabby had an eye for younger women, and shortly after he married Charlotte, the couple divorced. Later, they reconciled and married again. But in 1981, Charlotte again asked for a divorce, and Fred moved out of the main house into a smaller cabin on the farm. The reason for the divorce this time was that Fred was having an affair with a pretty 24-year-old bartender, Vicki McAllister.
Not exactly the most successful person in that part of the world. She attended bar. Her reputation was not of the purest.
On July 24th, 1981, Charlotte Grabby left the house to cultivate soybeans on the farm. Her children expected her home by dinner time, but she never returned home. When her children couldn't find her, they contacted the local sheriff. Fred told the sheriff that he had spoken to Charlotte earlier that day near a storage shed on the Grabby's farm, and their conversation got heated.
They got into an argument. He left the machine shed. Charlotte pursued him in her car.
She got in her vehicle, drove off, and was last seen. I last saw her driving up the interstate. That was his story, and consistently over time, that's what he said.
In the shed, authorities found Charlotte's uneaten lunch on her tractor. Her purse was also in the shed, along with her migraine medication and driver's license. And the neighbors said she saw Charlotte's car drive by earlier in the day, but the driver did not appear to be Charlotte.
They saw Fred's pickup go by, and then they saw Charlotte's car right behind it with a blonde, curly-haired woman driving it. Charlotte Grabby has dark, short hair, straight hair.
A few days later, Charlotte Grabby's car was found across the Indiana state line outside a bar in Terre Haute. Police found no blood, no evidence of violence, but they did recover a fully loaded handgun under the seat. Investigators learned that Charlotte had written a letter shortly before she disappeared, and that letter contained a warning. Charlotte Grabby disappeared from this remote field on her Illinois farm. Just prior to her disappearance, she asked her children to make a promise.
If she wasn't home by 4:30 p.m., we were supposed to come and look for her.
The reason? She was afraid of the man she was trying to divorce, Fred Grabby.
My dad would have fits of rage for seemingly no reason at all, directed mainly toward my mother, but sometimes toward my brother or myself, more my brother than me, actually. One particular instance, I heard yelling, so I ran outside. My brother and my dad were fighting physically, and my dad even took my brother by the side of the head and beat his head into the fender of the pickup.
Just 10 days before she disappeared, Charlotte left several notes in a safe deposit box in the local bank. In the notes, Charlotte accused her husband of stealing some farm equipment and said she didn't think she would live through a divorce. She said she was afraid of Fred and also his friend and business associate, Dale Kessler. When police interviewed Dale Kessler, he said he was home on the night Charlotte disappeared and that Fred Grabby had been with him. When a grand jury asked Fred Grabby about his whereabouts on the day Charlotte disappeared, he invoked his Fifth Amendment rights and refused to testify. With no evidence of a crime, the official investigation stalled. Charlotte Grabby became yet another missing person. Despite a $25,000 reward posted by the Grabby children, Charlotte's disappearance remained a mystery for the next 3 years.
It's all I thought about from the time I got up till the time I went to bed every night. How am I going to find my mom? She could be alive out there somewhere. Probably not, but she might be. And I had to go on that possibility, and I kept thinking, you know, if it were me, she would never give up.
With nowhere else to turn, in 1984, Charlotte's daughter hired a private detective, Charles Pearson. Pearson discovered that Fred Grabby had recently broken up with his longtime girlfriend, Vicki McAllister, and Pearson tracked her down in Indiana. Almost from the start, Vicki McAllister seemed anxious to talk about her life with Fred Grabby.
He was able to play on her emotions and to draw from her a horrible secret.
It was the secret to Charlotte Grabby's disappearance, and the story was so horrific, it was difficult to believe. Vicki claimed that she went to the shed to borrow a steel drum from Fred to haul some trash. When they heard Charlotte drive up, Fred told Vicki to hide behind a tractor. Charlotte and Fred immediately began to argue and soon turned violent.
From what Vicki McAllister told us, Fred actually choked Charlotte several times and then would let up on the pressure and let her regain consciousness and then would choke her again, making comments to her the whole time.
Vicki said that after Grabby choked Charlotte to death, he sodomized her. Afterwards, he used a grease gun to fill every orifice of her body to make it more flammable. He then put her body in the trash barrel and headed towards the river. Vicki drove Charlotte's car and abandoned it over the state line in Indiana. Later that night, Fred doused the body in diesel fuel, and while Vicki watched, Fred burned the body. The fire lasted throughout the night. Eventually, only Charlotte's skull remained. Grabby threw it in the Wabash River, saying that it would make good fish food. He then rolled the barrel into the river.
The story, when you hear the whole thing, it's really kind of hard to believe.
McAllister's tale horrified Charlotte's daughter.
It was almost overwhelming. Of course, I cried a lot, and over the course of the next few days, it had to sink in because there just was so much to it, you know, and it was so horrific, as you say. I just kept praying that my mom didn't go through any pain.
McAllister had plenty of motive to tell a story that would put Fred Grabby in prison.
There's no greater wrath than that of a spurned woman. She may have originally been concerned with long-term relationship with him. It lasted for a certain period of time, and then it ended. And then I think she was angry.
Vicky came to expect, if not be told, that she would share in the dynasty, the financial dynasty of the Grabby family, that she would become a part of everything, and that she and Fred would live happily ever after. I mean, that's the story that guys tell girls, and girls often believe.
In exchange for her testimony, Vicky McAllister was offered total immunity, relocation, and a new identity. And if Grabby was convicted, McAllister could claim the $25,000 reward offered by the Grabby children.
Anytime you have just one person's word against another, it's always better to have some type of physical evidence.
But there was another living witness to the events of that terrible night 3 years earlier. And that evidence would tell if Vicky McAllister's story actually had the ring of truth. Fred Grabby's ex-girlfriend, Vicky McAllister, took police to the scene of the cremation, which she says took place on the banks of the Wabash River, just underneath this mature maple tree. But after 3 years, there were no remains found anywhere in the vicinity.
I was with one of the attorney generals that was assisting our state's attorney in the prosecution of the case. And I made a comment to him, just wondering if at this burn site, if there was any possibility that petroleum products from the diesel fuel that was used could still be recovered in the soil around this site.
Since the Wabash River frequently overflows in the area of the maple tree, any traces of the diesel fuel in the soil would have long been washed away.
We took some soil samples and they were negative for petroleum products.
But one piece of potential evidence survived: the maple tree under which the funeral pyre allegedly burned.
Trees make excellent history books because they show us when events occurred nearby the tree. They can explain to us exactly when different events happened.
In this photo, Sheriff Crumrin is standing on the spot the barrel was allegedly placed. Was there any way for science to corroborate Vicky McAllister's story? In the spring and summer, roots transport water and nutrients from the surrounding soil up through the trunk and into a tree's branches, where they fuel the growth of very large cells. When the tree goes dormant in late summer and fall, it produces smaller, more dense cells. This cycle produces the familiar rings we see when we cut a tree branch or trunk. Each ring indicates another year has passed. If the tree absorbed diesel fuel from the gruesome funeral pyre, was there any way to tell?
Diesel fuel is a toxic material to trees. It will either kill the cells or it will affect their growth rate, their metabolism adversely. When it's absorbed by the tree, it will slow the growth rate of the cells that it's in contact with.
Investigators cut 5 branches from the tree, and when they counted back through the growth rings, they saw something startling.
In 1981, the growth of those branches had dramatically slowed from what it had been in previous years.
Growth rings from the year Charlotte disappeared were much thinner than earlier rings. But there was no way of knowing why this was so. To find out, pieces of each branch were ground into sawdust and given to Dr. Donald Dickerson, an organic chemist. Dickerson dissolved the samples and injected the sample into a gas chromatograph. The results indicated the presence of hydrocarbons, compounds indicative of petroleum products. Even more startling, only 2 of the 5 branches showed traces of petroleum, the ones on the side of the tree where Vicki McAllister said the cremation took place.
Samples on the other side of the tree were negative for hydrocarbons.
Some species of trees will translocate or carry the material laterally around the tree better than others. Maple trees in general tend to maintain fairly direct columns between the roots and the branches above.
A unique forensic approach had uncovered evidence that matched Vicki McAllister's bizarre and horrifying story exactly.
Heck of a coincidence.
John O'Brien spent 40 years as a crime reporter for the Chicago Tribune.
In the boondocks of Marshall, Illinois, way down in Clark County, I don't think there's another crime that comes close to not only the murder of Charlotte Grabby and the means in which her body was disposed of.
But the story doesn't end here. Another mysterious fire, an attempted prison breakout, and the murder of one of the Grabby children were all to impact Fred Grabby's trial. When scientists discovered hydrocarbons in the maple tree next to where Charlotte Grabby's body was allegedly incinerated, Fred Grabby was arrested and charged with murder. The star witness was Fred Grabby's ex-girlfriend, Vicki McAllister, who was given immunity to testify. Her story both fascinated and horrified courtroom spectators.
The first time I think I heard about the tree was when it came out in court. And I thought, wow, you know, that really, to me, proves Vicki was telling the truth about everything.
The motive? Money. Fred Grabby had no desire to split the family assets with his wife, even though it was Charlotte's inheritance which comprised the bulk of their holdings.
Most of the farm ground that they had, it's my understanding, belonged to her through her side of the family. And Fred was going to lose a lot of money, basically. That's what it all amounted to.
If the love of money is the root of all evil, the roots of a maple tree soaking up errant diesel fuel sealed Fred Grabby's fate. Fred Grabby was convicted of first-degree murder in the death of his wife and was sentenced to life in prison without parole. In a bizarre twist to a bizarre story, Fred Grabby's new girlfriend, Barbara Graham, armed with a gun, arrived at the jail one night and attempted to get him out of prison. She fired 5 shots, wounding one deputy in the leg.
He is able to get up on top of her, says, "Don't make me kill you." And at that time, the struggle ceased.
For that offense, Barbara Graham was sentenced to 16 years in prison. 2 months later, the home Fred and Charlotte shared and the house their children, Jeff and Cindy, had built next door burned to the ground. Arson investigators discovered both fires were deliberately set.
Oh, I believe Fred Grabby probably had some involvement with it, not in setting the fires directly, but I believe he probably had some involvement. But we'll never know, probably.
Fred Grabby's lawyers appealed the first verdict and, on a technicality, won a new trial. A month before the second trial, Fred's son, Jeff Grabby, who had testified against his father at the first trial, was found murdered in California with 3 bullet wounds to the chest.
We were notified by Seal Beach, California authorities that they had found the body of Jeff Grabby floating in one of the harbors out there.
To this day, some believe Fred Grabby had a hand in his son's murder, although Fred denies it.
I don't know if he had that kind of pull with people he could send out to California. I don't think so, but there's a lot of things I don't know.
The second trial ended the same way as the first. Fred Grabby was found guilty of murder and sentenced to 75 years in prison.
I wrote him a letter telling him that I forgave him for what he did. I hate what he did, but I still love him because he's my dad, if that makes sense.
No one has ever been charged with Jeff Grabby's murder, and no trace of Charlotte Grabby's remains have ever been recovered. Vicki McAllister claimed her reward, then left the area, relocated at the state's expense. She continues to fear that Fred Grabby will somehow take revenge, even from behind prison bars. The maple tree still grows not far from the Wabash River.
The maple tree, alive and growing, was one thing, one creation that Fred Grabby could not intimidate, could not reach, could not destroy.